loves to watch the demonstration flying at an air show. The hot flying at the major shows like at Paris and Farnborough, England, excites a crowd like nothing else. The noise. The deft maneuvering. The close view of the action. Sense of danger. That from the public's view is what hot flying is all about. Yet there is more, much more. Behind the scenes and in the cockpit with these pilots, there are hints of other dramatic flying challenges, the testing, the practicing, and ultimately the missions that such airplanes are made for. An exciting and much broader world of hot flying, often unseen and unrecognized by the public. Come along for an inside look at the pilots, their machines, and their memorable exploits. Flight demonstration teams of the world have refined the show elements of formation flying into fine art in the sky. Air forces from several nations have long histories of breathtaking team precision flying. Teams fly generally with 6 to 10 airplanes. Pilots who have endured a tough and exacting selection process get these coveted flight jobs. Their pilots fly a no room for error game of follow the leader, battling high G forces and coping with turbulence and the vortices from the airplanes ahead. U.S. Navy Blue Angels are among the best and are the team flying the newest fighters, McDonnell Douglas FA-18s. The aircraft come within feet of each other, sometimes at near supersonic speed. F-16s, stark white with a bold eagle design, are the mounts for the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds. Most demonstration teams feature well-proven aircraft flown by veteran pilots, and they make it look easy. Aerospace insiders on the airshow circuit get a special thrill when they witness the first public flight of a newly unveiled airplane. Most often, test pilots are at the controls. The French Rafale was flown by Dassault Chief Test Pilot Guy Miteau-Moreau. The Rafale first flew in 1986 and is evolving as a fighter for the French Air Force and Navy. test pilots fly show demonstrations in a way that seems more suspenseful. The test pilot has taken the airplane to the edges of its envelope and beyond. He knows the airplane's quirks and strengths. He has achieved a finesse for flying that comes with years of absolutely precise handling during flight test. Truly, the test pilot and machine are one, and it shows in the flight displays. Or when the initial carrier landing tests begin for the Navy version of the Rafale. But test flying, besides being rigorous, is dangerous. During the 1950s and 60s, the radical and remarkable X-series designs were being flown out of Edwards Air Force Base in California. As hard as the engineers and test pilots work to ensure safety, the possibility of a tragic accident always remains. On September 27, 1956, Captain Milburn Apt, on his first flight in the Bell X-2, became the first pilot to reach Mach 3.2. Within 10 seconds of this historic moment, the aircraft began an uncontrollable roll. Apt fought desperately to regain control of the aircraft. In this sequence, you can see the altimeter rapidly unwinding as G-forces alternate abruptly between +6 and -6. These violent forces knocked Apt unconscious. He never recovered. Both Apt and the X-2 were lost. Bruce Peterson flew the M2F2 in the early 1960s, a vehicle designed to test re-entry concepts later used on the Space Shuttle orbiter. On one flight, the aircraft experienced severe instability.
I started pushing over to gain speed to make my approach and push over to a fairly low angle attack. At that point in time, the nose slid out to one direction, immediately followed by a roll, and it coupled and got a very lateral, strong divergent lateral directional oscillation. The oscillations hit me across the head pretty smartly and dazed me. And I knew I had to recover wings level, because I was getting close to the ground. So I timed one of the oscillations and popped back on the stick and indeed did recover wings level. At that point in time, I looked ahead at me at my point of intended landing, and there was a helicopter hovering where I should be landing. So I told him to move west or get out of my way. And then I lit up an emergency solid rocket motor I had on board to give me a little more time. I went just behind the vehicle, didn't hit him, but either the rotor wash caught me or I got lower than I anticipated because I was off the marked runway. And I put the gear down, one gear door caught, and that flipped the vehicle, and that was the end of the ball game for the day.
Miraculously, Peterson survived the crash and has continued to make valuable contributions to aeronautical research, and the M2F2 was rebuilt and flown again. Since the 1950s and 60s heydays of flight testing has evolved into a more exact science, but the risks to the pilots are just as real, as seen in this emergency landing during initial flight tests of the F-16 when the landing gear failed. The pilots conducting initial test flights of the F-14 Tomcat also had an especially close call. Bob Smythe, former chief test pilot at Grumman, was the first to fly the F-14 Tomcat in 1970. Smythe was in the back seat on the second flight of the number 1 F-14. William Miller was at the controls. In this recorded sequence, we see and hear the final dramatic moments of that flight, from which both pilots survived.
Well, the geometry on this stick is miserable.
Wonder who designed that?
I don't know. Yeah, okay, a little slow there. Whoops. Flight control, I've lost the flight control system. Upward. Let her go. All right, just a second. No, I can't hold it. Eject it.
The airplane just dived right into the ground. And Bill initiated the ejection. We had these wonderful Martin Baker ejection seats. 0.4 of a second after the Bill's seat, the second seat, left, I went straight up. Good rocket seat, took me right straight up, because the airplane was more or less upright when I went out. And the parachute opened and everything looked great. I looked down and there was a bloody airplane right below me. 10,000 pounds of fuel were burning furiously. It was right below me. And you won't believe this, but you're kind of insulated or isolated or something at that time, and you're really, it's as though you're kind of standing off in the distance looking. You say, son of a gun, I'm going to land in that fire. And that's just about as emotional as you get over it.
A review of the film footage showed Smythe was lifted and then dropped into the trees about 100 yards downwind of the burning airplane. Long after the initial test flying and production run of a frontline fighter like the F-14, modifications are often desired. The testing is just as exacting and exhausting as it was the first time out. Let's fly with Kurt Schrader, chief test pilot for Grumman, as he takes a modified F-14 Tomcat through some exercises to evaluate design changes on the airplane. Before the flight, test crews, the test conductor and engineers brief the mission, weather conditions, and test range status. Ground personnel check the airplane and test gear, including radar, telemetry, and computers. And finally, the crew suits up and heads for the flight line and does their own walk-around inspection of the airplane and all its systems. With all ready and Grumman Air Traffic Control at the Calverton, New York facility giving the go-ahead, the test, intended to explore engine and design changes on the airplane, begins. Arriving at the test range, Schrader performs a series of standard check maneuvers to ensure that the aircraft and instrumentation function properly. The first is a left level roll. At the telemetry station, this maneuver is displayed in real time on a computer screen and recorded on videotape. The next check maneuver is a right level roll. After a left side slip and a right side slip, the final check maneuver is a left wind-up turn to 3 Gs.
20
The Navy seeks to consider whether the lifting surfaces that extend from each wing's leading edge, called the glove vanes, can be eliminated to reduce weight. The initial test maneuvers consist of a series of wind-up turns, first flown with the glove vanes extended, then retracted. Now, aircraft and pilot are ready for the most challenging maneuver of the mission, an abrupt pitch-up that exerts tremendous stress on the aircraft. The maneuver provides a rapid change in both flight path direction and aircraft energy state, important characteristics in maneuvering during air combat. Aircraft stress measurements are taken throughout the maneuvers for later analysis. Such tests and many more ultimately offered data that was used to determine to eliminate the vanes on subsequent production aircraft, the F-14A Plus and F-14D. When all the tests on the card are completed, the aircraft returns to base. How do test pilots gain the flying finesse and presence of mind it takes for their job? First, they are intuitive in their flying and almost sense events ahead. But second, they are rigorously trained. Edwards is the home for Air Force Test Pilot School. Each year, a small group of highly seasoned and rigidly selected pilots learn the test pilot trade. Student test pilot Captain Ed Wilson is conducting a briefing for a flight that will involve a series of spin tests. When the briefing is completed, student and instructor proceed to the flight line. The signal is given to taxi to the runway. The chase plane, a T-38 Talon two-seat aircraft, follows close behind. The test aircraft takes off. And is joined by the chase plane. Together, they fly to the test range. Over the range, the chase plane drops back as the T-37 prepares for the first test on the card. The chase plane must stand off at a safe viewing distance during each of the test maneuvers. The tracking camera, however, clearly records each test. This mission included 3 stall tests and 7 different spin tests. You hear the student pilot, Captain Wilson, recording data as he puts his T-37 through a grueling inverted spin.
Okay, ground, we're in a spin. There's 1 turn, 24.5. 2 turns, 24. ALA's bouncing all over. 3 turns, we got 23.5. Being NASA modified recovery, 30 knots, 130 knots. Recover, let's spin. Don't want to do that. And we're recovered.
No, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't touch the red edge.
Okay.
You heard the instructor pilot, Major Chuck Stewart, with a word of caution during recovery.
Okay, now you got the engine.
Okay. Now we're off left. I would dive at 15. Ignition off. Ignition's off.
Good call, TM.
After each test, the student reviews the data he has taken. And for this one, he was complimented with a good job by the instructor.
Fairly oscillatory spin. We were inverted. I had probably plus or minus 20 degrees on the oscillation.
The flight has taken 55 minutes. Captain Wilson describes the inverted spin.
In the roll couple inverted spin, it's pretty violent in the airplane. First of all, we're strapped in as tight as we can because we'll be tossed up against the canopy of the aircraft if we're not. So in fact, it feels like a cartwheel almost as you enter the spin. You start a roll and then stand on a rudder and push the stick forward, and the airplane kind of tumbles across like this. And it feels like that in the airplane. You're slung out of your seat at about, you go to about 1.5 to maybe 2 negative G's initially, oscillating back and forth for the first few turns around where you're not really in a spin, but in a gyration. We call it post-stall gyration. And then you settle into just a spin where all you see is ground below you. It's just a nice feeling to get out of that kind of spin because it's an uncomfortable spin for you.
The sharply honed skills of test pilots make them adept in demonstrating new aircraft. Anatoly Kvotchur, chief test pilot for the Soviet Mikoyan Design Bureau, first publicly flew the MiG-29 fighter at the 1988 Farnborough Air Show in England. His remarkable tail slide earned him attention and respect.
Vertical maneuver is not very difficult for our pilots on our aircraft. And we hope that all pilots will do that maneuver.
At the Paris show the next year, Kvotchur flew again and truly proved his mettle. On opening day of the show, Kvotchur initiated his flight routine. But after a turn out of the square loop, something suddenly and dramatically went wrong. The right engine quit cold, as evidenced by a 20-foot lick of flame. What happened next was a classic twin-engine accident sequence. The power from the operating left engine pushed the airplane to the right. At such a slow speed, the pilot could not counteract the turn, and the airplane nosed toward the ground. Had there been more altitude, it would have entered a right-hand spin or spiral. At this point, you can see that the left engine is operating, its upper intake vent wide open and sucking in air, its rear nozzle tight and delivering thrust normally. The dead right engine needs no air, and its nozzle is splayed open. Kvotchur said later his first instinct was to save the aircraft. When that became impossible, he directed the airplane toward a grassy area to prevent injury to people on the ground. When that was guaranteed, he saved himself and yanked the ejection seat handle. He punched out none too soon, a bit over 2 seconds before the airplane hit. His parachute fully opened when he was only a few feet above ground. Again, as the airplane hit, you can see the left engine carrying power to impact explodes a last gasp of fiery thrust as the airplane crumples into the grass. The cause of the accident? Damage to the right engine earlier in the flight when birds were sucked into the engine. Another Soviet test pilot pushed the limits at Paris with his flight demonstration in an even hotter new fighter interceptor. The Su-27 is larger, heavier, and about 40% more powerful than a MiG-29. But Viktor Pugachev stunned observers with the Cobra maneuver. The airplane's nose pitches up beyond the vertical, but the airplane maintains a level flight path and then recovers to normal flight. The airspeed drops almost 200 knots in a few seconds. Such extreme agility could give it a strong advantage in a dogfight. At a Soviet air base outside of Moscow, on a chilly winter day, with cloud ceiling about 400 feet and low visibility, Pugachev, who is chief test pilot for the Sukhoi Design Bureau, put on a striking low-altitude demonstration for Aviation Week video cameras. He was about to prove again how the test pilot and the airplane, like the jockey and his racehorse, are one. The Su-27 is the first fully fly-by-wire fighter for the Soviet Air Forces. It's been operational since around 1984, though it's been produced in small numbers. Its big nose houses powerful radar. The Su-27 can carry 10 or more missiles, and it has advanced electronic guidance and targeting systems. All of this suggests it is a potent interceptor on a par with any of its Western counterparts. And it may just be the most maneuverable of the heavy fighters. Pugachev certainly makes it look that way. Pilots involved in test and demonstration flying may deal with extreme pressures and special challenges, but they will not find themselves in another pilot's gun sights. When jet fighters are really put to work, a high drama may be just around the corner. There are added and sometimes intangible risks for the aviators who fly daily from the decks of the Navy's large aircraft carriers. These fast-moving floating air bases for up to 75 airplanes and 5,000 officers and crew represent one of the greatest flight challenges. Watch what it takes to mount a practice fighter and attack mission. After briefings, crews join their aircraft already on deck. They are fueled. Bombs and missiles are loaded. The aircraft captains give a final check. There's a lot going on during an exercise of this scope, but it's choreographed so that the fighter, attack, and support aircraft take off from the deck in the proper order. The SH-3 helicopter departs and is stationed beside the carrier for search and rescue if a pilot ejects from an airplane in trouble. The S-3 Viking, as well as the helicopter, are the carrier's defense against submarines. Then Ka-6 refueling tankers are launched. The E-2C Hawkeye, with radar to keep an eye on the skies, is catapulted into the air. Then the EA-6B is launched. It will jam enemy radar. A-6E intruders are next with their heavy bomb load. Now F-14 Tomcats, the swing-wing fighters, lead the deck. They have the speed and firepower to intercept aircraft and missiles hundreds of miles from the carrier. And finally, the FA-18 Hornets are launched, fitted to fight in air combat or attack enemy ground targets. The Hawkeye serves as control center for the mission and communicates with each flight leader. All squadrons are at assigned altitudes and headings. The Hawkeye radar shows enemy fighters or bogies coming from the east, others to the south.
X3, Dog 2, 28 miles, Angels 29. Dog 2 has a flight of 2, hot, 18 miles.
Threat 101, 10 miles, tracking north hot.
Here, it's barriers under the sector. Where? Right one, right side. Okay, on the right side of you now. Don't got nobody, right in front of you. Come back, hard left, hard left.
5 miles.
Turn around if you want to
Touch.
116 high, engaged. Dog one engaged. Push it back.
5 miles.
Keep it tally. Tally 2. Tally 3.
Oh, this is pushing.
I got the Texas 2 going through. And Flasher have a shot in. Preset. Left line is going to
16 is dead, Dog 1.
Let's disengage.
The strike airplanes have reached the target areas and start their runs. FA-18s are first to suppress enemy fire. They're followed by the A-6 intruders. Soon the area is secured and all aircraft are to return to the carrier. But the encounter has emptied the tanks of the fighters. They take fuel from the tanker before they head home. At 10 miles out, the carrier's traffic control center directs the approach. When the pilot has visual contact, he looks for a pattern of lights, the meatball that guides the airplanes to touchdown on the deck. There's the ball. Final glide slope corrections. Keep the ball in the center. and hit the deck at precisely the right spot to catch a wire and get yanked to a stop in less than 2 seconds. Day or night, for pilots on the carrier, it's constant training. It's agreed by all who've been there that night landings on a deck, particularly as it pitches and rolls, are the most difficult. Visual references are lost. There's no horizon, and the pilot can't see the deck. And then there's the weather. Winds and rough seas, sleet, snow, ice, and men and airplanes on a slippery deck. Navy pilot Mike Bouvier.
And you say, okay, you're at 3/4 of a mile, call the ball, which is a key to transition to a visual scan, and the LSOs at that point pick you up visually and start talking to you. Well, at 3/4 of a mile, he said, call the ball. I looked out, and there wasn't no ball because, in fact, I was still in the clouds. So I waited and waited, and I'm still flying. This is about the last 15 to 20 seconds of flight. I'm waiting a number of seconds and I'm still flying the needles down to the minimum altitude, and I still don't see anything. Finally, about the time I'm going to add power and take it around, the LSOs say paddles contact, which means they see me, even though I don't see the ship. They see my landing light. They say paddles contact, little right for lineup, little power back on. So they're giving me some call before I can see the ship. My heart's going at about 400 beats a minute, of course, at this point. And about 3, 4, 5 seconds later, I finally start to see something. I break out, which means I get clear of the clouds and see an outline of the ship, pick up the meatball, which is my saving grace there, and I make a last-minute play for the deck. I can't see any of the lineup because the snow's falling on the deck and melting and creating like a shimmering effect, so where the landing area is not illuminated. But I see a couple airplanes on the left and a line of airplanes on the right and kind of go, well, this is about right. And I get it aboard, catch a 4-wire, but that was probably the toughest landing I ever had to make.
While it's naval aviation's role to protect the fleet, the Air Force defends the homeland. In Alaska, with the Soviet border only several miles away, squadrons are on constant alert, ready to assert air sovereignty and maintain air superiority. F-15 pilots there have some of the best air combat training opportunities in the world due to the low population and varied terrain. They hone their skills day after day and can practice intercepts and dogfight techniques at all altitudes. The training is put into practice when the Air Force sees a potential threat approaching Alaska. A Soviet Bear bomber drones toward the coast. At Galena, 2 F-15s are kept ready for takeoff on 5 minutes' notice. Pilots suit up in layer after layer to protect them from the harsh conditions in case of bailout. This could be the real thing. Live missiles are armed before takeoff. While fighter pilots taxi to their takeoff positions, the controllers on the ground balance distance, time, and fuel for an encounter that may be 1,000 miles from Anchorage. An AWACS takes off. And a tanker is scrambled from the alert force at Eielson. Aboard the AWACS, teams begin to coordinate the intercept as the airplanes converge on the intruder, a 4-engine bomber capable of carrying nuclear bombs and cruise missiles. With fuel in 2 internal tanks and 2 wing tanks, and armed with 4 Sparrow and 4 Sidewinder missiles, an F-15C weighs over 33 tons. Afterburner takeoffs are the rule for the fighters. The intercept mission can last 6 or 7 hours, making fuel critical. These missile-armed F-15s refuel over pack ice in the Arctic Ocean before the intercept. Both fighters and AWACS use their radio and radar selectively to minimize Soviet opportunities to gather intelligence about their capabilities.
10 miles. 10 miles going on.
Gradually, the distance closes. The AWACS usually remains at least 100 miles from Soviet aircraft, but a tanker may close to within 10 miles with the fighters and then remain nearby during the intercept. In the clear air of the Arctic, visual contact is often made at 50 miles or more. The turboprop engines of the Bear make it seem out of date, but appearances can be deceiving. This is one of the most capable long-range bombers and cruise missile platforms in the air. Major Steve Brown describes what it's like to approach a Soviet Bear.
In the final actual intercept portion of the Bear intercept, or coming up to identify friendly or foe, the most important thing that we're worried about is, of course, the tail guns on the Bears. We're making sure in our tactics as we're coming in, there's always a guy in a firing position, such that if we are fired on as we're coming in, again identifying that Bear, that we'll have a person who would be in a position that they could fire back if called upon. Our first response, though, if we found the guns uncaged and tracking us, would be to get out of the gun range. So our first thing we'd do is to break away. Once we have taken stock of the situation, we figure that, in fact, the Bears do not mean us any harm and are flying in international airspace. And we're going to go on in, take a look and see, identify the type of Bear that it is. And then the next thing now is we want to get some pictures of them. So we'll have one person in identifying, looking for a tail number on the Bear, while the other one is in a cover position.
The intercept team may fly in formation with the Soviet bombers for 2 hours or more, taking turns refueling from the KC-135 as needed. As the Americans take photographs, their counterparts aboard the Bear use their own cameras. At times they wave, but the F-15 pilots rarely reciprocate. This is a Soviet bomber approaching U.S. territory. No game, but part of a serious show of strategic readiness by both sides. Lieutenant Colonel Pete Marty.
It's a unique experience that in flying jet fighters, and where you wear helmets and have your own jet engine and cockpit noise, you very seldom hear anything outside your aircraft. However, approaching a Bear aircraft is unique in that you can actually hear the counter-rotating props grinding away as it's moving through the sky. And you're impressed by the size of the aircraft and the capability, and of course, the big red star in the tail.
Eventually, the intruders turn and head for home, and the U.S. flyers do the same. Over the Mediterranean and nearby territory, F-14 pilots have had some anxious encounters. In 1986, as seen on this gun camera footage, Navy pilots chased down and tracked in the crosshairs a rarely seen Soviet MiG-25, one of the fastest and deadliest fighter interceptors flying today.
214, continue your vector 084, text go 75.
Wonder where it's foul went. 666 just for the hell of it. Oh shit, he's doing this. Watch the closure.
Go ahead and set speed and angles as desired. Your vector is closing 60.
20 knots. Half mile. Okay, we're under control.
Calling your level for your happy hour. 05 is
zero closure.
Okay. 214, your happy hour will be 18,000.
This encounter, with the F-14s trailing as close as a mile behind the MiG-25, ended without incident. It was still one mission the pilots will never forget. But encounters like that can turn hot quickly. In January of 1989, as seen in this simulation, a pair of patrolling F-14s encountered two aggressive Libyan MiG-23s. The Libyans, coming head-on from a higher altitude, kept on closing the gap, even as the F-14s jinked repeatedly away from a confrontation. Now, from actual F-14 gun camera footage, listen to the critical moments of the fight. See the shadowy images of a MiG-23 during the encounter, and watch as a missile is fired and hits its target.
4 miles.
Okay, he's got a missile off.
Breaking right.
Good hit on one.
Roger that. Good kill.
I've got the other one. Select Fox 2. Aye, that's Fox 2.
Coming hard, start.
So, shoot him. I haven't got a tone.
Got the second one.
I got the second one on the nose right now.
Okay, I'm high cover on you.
Lock him up. Lock him up. Can't shoot him, Fox 2. I can't. I don't have a tone. So what? Good kill.
Hey, good kill. Pilot ejected.
Of course, beyond the aerial encounters and exercises, there's a hidden world of flying we know little about. Super secret military operations and testing go on daily. Only in recent months was first footage of the stealth fighter, the Air Force F-117A, released. It had been flying for 8 years and been on operational status from a base in Nevada for 5 years before the public even saw its picture. It's a remarkable looking machine, weirdly angled for minimal radar reflectance. In fact, were it not for the flat, thick, and dramatically slanted windshield glass, the pilot's helmet would create more of a radar image than does the whole airplane. Little is known of its weapons, but it can carry bombs and used that capability for the first time in the attack on Panama in 1989. 2 stealth fighters dropped 2 2,000-pound bombs near a Panamanian Defense Forces barracks before it came under attack by U.S. Army Rangers. Analysts suspect the airplane also carries internally stored missiles. Certainly for the pilot of this clandestine and uncommon airplane, the stealth fighter is the ultimate in flying. There may be nothing more demanding than actual air combat. But the ballet of solo pilot and single airplane, like that of General Dynamics test pilot Bland Smith in an F-16C, excites all who see it. Sit back and watch and listen and enjoy this pilot's eye view of one of his sensational display flights at a recent Paris show. The airplane's head-up display will show information on the F-16's altitude in hundreds of feet above ground, the current G load, the maximum G during this flight, and heading and attitude information. You'll see and hear occasional warnings indicating low speed, or landing gear retracted at low speed and low altitude.
Clear to go. Pack. Good burner. And there comes airspeed, nose gear, steering's off. Smoke is on. 150, we're up. Okay, cross at 32. That's okay.
Warning.
1, 2.
most difficult maneuver during the F-16 demonstration flight is the 9G turn. The pilot comes in at about 375 to 390 knots, makes a 9G 360-degree turn, followed by a rotation to the vertical.
F-16, 2 minutes left.
He's in that 9G envelope from anywhere from 14 to 17 seconds. It's very difficult, very demanding. It requires a great deal of physical endurance on the part of the pilot to keep his mental alertness, to keep that turn carefully coordinated, and to hold altitude exactly as planned.
Nancy 3, Brad. Edge. Surface wind 22, 0 degrees, 6 knots.
Smith and pilots like him do just what they're supposed to do, day in and day out. And they tap into their deep reserves of skill, precision, and composure when the pressure's on. They stay cool when the flying gets hot.
Yeah, damn.